So yeah, Rich. This is probably one of the nicest spots we're ever going to do a podcast. I think. Just sitting out here, even though it's so tempting to go and get in the water. But thanks so much for coming and sitting down and chilled. Like we met. I guess we met actually the start of this year.
Yes.
I was teaching yoga at a studio here in Brighton, and your better half is also a teacher there, and then sort of found out about what you were doing, found you on Instagram, what you were doing, and then once I started to hear about your story, your journey, like you were instantly someone that I was like, right, you're a very interesting character, and I think your outlook on stuff is super chilled, and like such an amazing outlook on life and sport. So yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation. But I mean, we've already been talking for probably about half an hour about loads of different things and we've gone in deep with some stuff already. But let's kind of go into, first off, where you started off in sport, so as a coach, and sort of then we'll get on to I'm sure we're going to get into some pretty cool stuff. But so yeah, where did it kind of, the world of sport sort of start for you?
My first job in sport was at Fulham Football Club.
Yep.
So I started off thinking I wanted to do rehab and treatment of injuries, but quickly realised that that wasn't for me, and I wanted to get more into performance training. So I went from Fulham to Harlequins Rugby League, and then I always had the English Institute of Sport in my mind. That's where I wanted to work. So I fortunate enough to get a job there. I started working with the British diving team in the Olympic cycle between Beijing and up until and including the London Olympic Games.
Nice.
Which was a really great experience with both that sport and also with the EIS. It was just an amazing place to learn and grow as a coach. And then I went to China as a performance coach with Exos, and I was working with their Olympic diving teams in Beijing as well as their judo teams in Shanghai, and that was the biggest life experience for me. It was amazing, professionally as well as life experience, just living in that country, touring with the Chinese national team, and then it was just an amazing learning curve. And then professionally came back, worked with Hintsa Performance, a little bit of Formula One, but mainly with their corporate clients, and then most recently with British Ski and Snowboard and their Slopestyle and halfpipe squad.
So those guys, the halfpipe guys, are the guys that are doing tricks and aerial, and they're turning themselves in all sorts of different shapes.
Exactly that. Yeah. For some reason, most of my career has been with acrobatic athletes, a little bit of Cirque du Soleil, and for some reason, it's an amazing.
Was that a passion? Like, was it something that you? I
can struggle to do a forward somersault, but it just happened. It's just the way it was, and it just kept going and going, and I'm really grateful to. I originally wanted to be in just football or just rugby, and that was it. But I'm so grateful I've had such different experiences, and those athletes, they're just really wonderful to be around. All athletes are, but it was just a really great learning for me to see their outlook on how people are kind of risking their lives in some instances to do what they do.
Do what you love in the risk of really hurting yourself.
Yeah.
That so your role was strength and conditioning all the way through.
Yep.
What sort of differences, like you spoke about going to China, like that one, the cultural shift just from being in England and the UK and the way we train and the way we do things is obviously a lot different, and just the culture around what we do. What was sort of like, were there main differences you saw in the way, I don't know, the outlook to training for the Chinese compared to the British? Because especially in the acrobatic sort of diving, it is China lead that, don't they? They're really fundamental.
Yeah.
It's a strength of theirs. And what sort of like a big regime looking like over there compared to here, I guess?
Yeah. So leaving the EIS, which was the English Institute of Sport, which is very evidence-based, leading the field at the time, I believed in the terms of their processes and how they go about physical training. Stepping into China was just the complete opposite end. There was no process. It was very much, and this is not a negative to China. What later came about to me was that there are many different ways to get world-class performance, and and it was as an athlete in China, you start from a very young age, and you're in the system, so you get looked after, you get accommodation, you get your kit, you get home and board, and you're just in the system. And certainly with diving, what I saw with myself was a very family type of environment. And not to say that isn't the same in England, but that's what stood out to me most. There was more fun than I thought was going to happen in China. I thought China was very hard. Was going to be very harsh.
That's a big outlook from a lot of people, isn't it? They think that it's going to be like really regimented and really strict.
Yeah, and there is that element, definitely, and that's the way it is. But everyone's bought into that, and it's part of it. And I think, the reason why the China are so good at closed skill sports, and what I mean by closed skill is sports where there's no relatively low reaction.
The environment doesn't change too much.
Yeah, if you're about to step up and do a dive, you know exactly what you need to do. You can do it in your own time. Weightlifting, gymnastics, kind of ping pong. That's more of a chaotic environment. But again, it's the amount of practice they put into that is amazing. But the reason they do that is just the system is set up for practice and for the continual. The word I'm trying to use, just the continual practice. And what couldn't happen in England is the amount of hours they put in.
Yeah.
They do put far more hours in than England do, and they have far more athletes. But go back to what surprised me about the divers is that the environment was very family-like. They celebrated when someone was about to try a new trick for the first time. Obviously, they'd been built up to get to that point. Everyone would stop and watch around the pool. Big support. So I saw someone land flat on his back from 10 meters. And everyone just started clapping, praised him.
For trying it, even if they failed
for just trying. Because and again, that's more in acrobatic sports. But how can you get better if you don't fail?
Yeah, mate, that in itself is amazing. Like that whole scenario, like the fact that a whole team sat round watching them, regardless of outcome, to just support them. And
then he, for that particular athlete, this was a world-class athlete, and he had the rest of the day off. He'd taken a big slam. It's just. But he came back the next day and
go again.
Did it again.
The same scenario though. Like everyone gets round him. Wow.
Yeah. Because he's pushing the boundaries.
That's something I've never. Well, what an environment! That's so cool. That's an amazing environment to grow.
And then you've got kind of in that environment, you had video screens, so everything's been recorded. He had 2 coaches for one athlete. The feedback and the coaching system was so really well put together. Really athlete. Well, it's in some places coach centered, but in that environment, the athlete, you've got so many angles of how to improve, and it was just really wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of hearing how different probably the internal structure looks compared to what the outside perception of like a Chinese diving team would look. I think everyone would probably think it's a bit sort of more harsher.
I definitely Judo was a harsher environment, but there's a lot more respect not a lot more respect, there's a lot of respect in Judo. I think just being a martial art. I had colleagues who worked with handball, for example, and they saw that darker side to what the expectations athletes were getting hit, getting punished if they did something wrong.
Wow.
It's a really a big contrast, and I guess the old Chinese way versus the diving way, for example.
Yeah.
And one thing that China did try to do as well, they try and do they cookie cut. So if that process works for that sport, well, let's put it onto this sport, and let's put it onto this sport, and it doesn't work like that.
So that's an interesting point as well, leading on to the fact that you went from football and then you went into Olympic sports, but not only, and then within the Olympic sports you've got different disciplines within the Olympic sports. So how much of what you as a professional coach would you train that would stay fairly similar throughout? And then what is it, the stuff that you kind of see that you definitely change, it's got to change from discipline? Or is it completely different environments from the word go? There's no fundamental basics that stay throughout, or there are, everything is needs to have its own unique environment?
I think you have to approach each sport with a unique mindset.
Yeah.
You've as a coach, and it'd be interesting to hear your point of view, but as an athlete, but as a coach, you know how you need to start. You need to set the foundation. There's no point doing, highly complex, explosive movements if someone can't squat or land properly, as an example. But ultimately, as a strength coach, you have to get the trust and buy-in of an athlete. So then, in China, I had another barrier or potential barrier at the start, was that I was a foreigner. And so I was a foreigner in their country. So I needed to earn their trust. And so...
How did you get the role in the first place? How did you even get out there to do that?
It's through LinkedIn. I got approached by one of the recruitments at Exos, approached me, as he did a few other people, and just applied for the job and got the job.
Yeah.
And it was just...
So they trusted you. That's the thing.
Exactly.
But then you're right, you've got to get the trust and buy-in.
Exos had, or Athletes Performance at the time, but now it's Exos. They obviously they still have a huge name in sport, and the NFL Combine, that's their kind of shop window. But and so you're in there with Exos and Athletes Performance, but you also have to earn the right to coach. And I think why that was so much more important in China was because they have to save face. It's just part of, I think, on a wider Asian culture, mistake is not seen as a good thing. You need to save face. You need to, and so trying something new is a big risk. Now it's a risk for everyone, but in environments other environments, say in England, risk is good because you have to learn. You're growing and you can learn from that. But in China, it was very not like that. Like they didn't want to. If they come across seeing as they've made a mistake, then that's very bad.
Yeah.
For personally and culturally. So all I did to start with was just to correct some of their movement. I didn't change their programming, even though it didn't fitted with what I believed in. I just corrected their technique so they were just moving better. And then I just collected some simple measurements, just simple monitoring that then showed the coach detailed information on their own program, not what I was doing, but what they were doing. And then so that just gave a really good place to start with to have a conversation. And then that just got so much trust, and then we could start to work together because, his expectation turned out to be not what was actually happening, and so which was so powerful for him. Like it got me connection, but it was just really useful for him. And so that's what worked. That's what worked in that instance.
Because I think one, there has to be every sport, without doubt, the training has to be completely different, and you can't. But there's also an element like you can take snippets from other people and what they're training. So for me, for example, as I was growing up, I was looking at how boxers were doing what they were doing, like how they were training, how they were moving, because I was like, how can I take their footwork and add it into what I'm doing? Lighter on the feet, a bit more powerful, explosive. Swimmers, like how can I do that? How can I take into account their arm stroke length, like the ability to reach out overhead with that? Because that would have been, I guess I always took an interest in the physical side of training, because I was like, how can I physically make myself a good athlete? But then what parts of other sports can I take that might be worthwhile from a physical point of view, adding into my own thing? And then it really expanded from there, and then it's actually like the skill, and we spoke about this kind of similar, was once you kind of go into past the physical side of it and you get into like the psychological mentality, you realise like most athletes, their mentality, especially at the higher end, very, very similar.
Yes.
What they do, the skill they have is just different. And then you really start to knuckle down into like the person, the individual. How much of what I guess you were doing were you having to take into account like the individual as a person as well, like the emotional side of them as well? And I imagine we'll delve into this in a bit later, but as well as giving them a physical program, like are you as a strength and conditioning coach kind of taking on board how they're emotionally reacting to it, like changing and training? And
you have to, yeah. I mean, in the early part of my career, I just thought, well, you need to get stronger or you need to get faster. This is what you do, so you need to go and do it. And that's just never going to work. And learn that very quickly. And you have to, physical training is a stress, and that is one stress, and then they have emotional stress, and they have all the different stresses in their environment that you have to take into account. And ultimately what I prescribe for someone to improve strength or power, whatever quality you're trying to look, rate of force development, whatever you're trying to look at, it has to fit with them, and ultimately it's their body that's changing. Now, it's nice in an environment if you can measure that objectively in some form of power or rate of force, or you're looking at some quality that's changing. But I think this is where acrobatic sports, and you can measure jumps and all that kind of stuff, but really they have to feel right in the air.
Yeah.
You can't measure that.
Yeah.
And ultimately what supports that is confidence and a belief. And so they could be doing an exercise that I feel, well, that's not really offering you anything. But if they're doing it and it's making them feel better, then who am I to say don't do that?
Yeah.
And so kind of choosing my battles, what's worth disrupting versus that's not worth it.
That's really, I think as a coach, that's something, me as coaching people as well, that's something that I'm super hypersensitive to, I think, because you want to give people enough to make them better, but you also don't want to give them enough that has so from a physical point of view, I want to give you something that's physically or technical that's going to change your ability to do what you do in a better way, but at the same time I don't want to disrupt anything that you're doing that's going to have a psychological effect on you. So it could be like a loss of you could instantly have a loss of form because you're overthinking something, and you're away from just doing it and in your flow of that actual ability to do it. That's a real fine line as a coach, and it's such a difficult one from the athlete side of view, because sometimes you hold on to like what you've been doing for ages, and you don't want to let go of what has got you where you are, to then take on some new information, try something new, at the risk of failing or becoming or losing everything that you've got. I think that's a real fear in athletes as well. You feel fear of like trying something new, changing something, technique, physical attribute, whatever. It's like a mental attribute that could actually affect everything that's got you to where you are right now. It's a lot easier in younger athletes, because they're in a lovely phase of just learning, taking on information and trying to figure out who they are. But the actual established athletes, they've got stuff that's ingrained, that's worked for them to a degree. That's a really good.
I think as well with that, or in the environments that I've in the later part of my career, to set up times that you can allow new things to. Periods where you can test, you're going to have a dip in performance. If you're going to try new techniques, or you're going to try and correct a technique or try something new, you're going to have a dip. There's no question. And to allow that and to honour that, and to just provide a space that that the athletes can try new things, and there's no expectation to maintain this. You can't maintain optimal. It's an undulation of ups and downs. In my experience, you can obviously stay at a kind of threshold, but to peak, it's you can plan into that and build into that. But to try new things, to provide a safe environment that you can and to say it's all right to fail, and these are whether it's a competition that you highlight that you're going to try something new and it doesn't matter, or you can, in acrobatic sports, it's using crash mats, it's using foam pits, it's using support things to just try and get a feel, and
because you can physically hurt yourself. Would you schedule it in?
Yes, definitely.
Literally, a scheduled session would be right. This scheduled session is the fail session.
Yeah, not in the fail session, but just okay. We're going to try this and see how you get on with it, and we're going to add it in, and it like all sport, but in acrobatic sport, you're building on a skill.
Yeah.
So they'll always start with simple movements, and then we're going to work on a twist that's off axis, a cork. And you might be going, okay, we'll try it this way, try it that way, and play with it. There's no, how you give me your interpretation of it. I'm not an acrobatics coach, I'm a strength coach, but I think that's, you're looking at the team is toward, Ross, who's the GB Park and Pipe acrobatic. It's just so wonderful to see him do that, and to be part of that environment where you're allowing people to fail and to try and to experiment and to have that ultimate creativity and express what you want to express.
Yeah, I've definitely been in environments where that's not been allowed, and it's been very, very because you can feel like there's an element of judgment as well, which is interesting from like the Chinese point of view. Of culturally, they don't want to fail, so culturally there's that pressure. But again, flipped from actually the internal side of the diving team, they were doing it where they were kind of like pushing their culture aside for a bit, because to get better and actually perform at highest, they were having to encourage each other to do that, which is really, really interesting. So you, from a physical point of view, like the training that you've given people and knowing you as a person as well, you've transitioned into more sort of yoga style movement. Like you were saying a minute ago, you will do 30 minutes of flow in the morning to get your own personal body right, and you've only adopted that recently, like
last few years. But I mean, well, recently, like my daily yoga is recently, because I've just got a few physical things going on in my body, and really, a lot of my mind, my head is at the moment with movement is it's great to develop qualities, physical qualities, attributes in performance. And what I say performance is in a sport, and this is where I've been trained, in the sense of looking at someone's rate of force development, how quickly a muscle fires, how much how well they use elastic energy, so bouncing, how well they jump, how well they land. But like as a human being, and looking at movement, I think there's so much more to it than that. And
so what I mean is, what I was getting at was how do you feel yours has developed into, rather than textbook style,
so much,
to like really open to
feel what your body wants, to tune into that, what feels nice, what doesn't feel right, and just enjoying movement, rather than I need to do this because I need to burn calories, or I need to, forget that. For me, what feels good, what do you want to do,
and how do you mix that with performance though? So because there will be an element surely there's some non-negotiables here, in order for you to be the best long jump athlete you can be, you're going to need the elasticity, you're going to need the leg power, and in order to do that, here's a training program that is that. But around that, you can again, I think that's an individual journey, because I think some people will be open to that and not. I can only talk from my experience. Some athletes it's holding them back. You've got to hold them back from their training, because they're doing too much, and they for whatever reason they're doing too much, and they're not trusting the process, and they're putting themselves into a bit of a hole. And they're the ones that I think to nurture and to put in movement that feels nice. And it might just be a walk, it might be an easy yoga flow, it might be doing some mobility on a mat, versus the athletes who it's kind of like, come on, we've got to get some gains in the gym now. You got to it's a strength phase or whatever. I think everyone goes through that, don't they? There's always not everyone, but there's a majority. You see it a lot. Athletes who get to the point where they will eventually start saying, "I realised the way when I realised less was more." Everyone, less was more, and always. I realised that, but. It is a journey. You got to go through it. It's how soon does that journey happen for you, and when you start to realise it. And sometimes it can actually trigger through a physical trauma or
for sure.
Psychological trauma, something like that.
If you're talking about athletic population, I think what's a bit easier in Olympic sport is that you have a 4-year cycle, and so if you're competitive on the world stage, they want to be world champions or whatever. But ultimately, it's you're aiming for the Olympic Games, so you have a 4-year period where you can try new things and you can build into that crescendo, that moment. Whereas if you're a team sport, then you're looking at your game, 1 game, 2 games a week, you're kind of maintaining, and again, from your point of view, it's a tougher environment to trust the process, and because you're going to undulate all the time.
It's something you just can't teach. You can't. I think it's harder to tell people as well. When you tell them, no, come on, trust the process. It's something you've got to experience, hasn't it?
Trust that recovery is going to do you more right now than going in the gym.
But actually, the smarter that I feel like the athletes I've met and come across and seen, the ones that figure that out very early, that their longevity is is way
Yes.
more, way more.
Yeah.
And they don't have those huge ups and downs. You're looking for that consistency. So if you're thinking like of the ups and downs, like these huge spikes and troughs, but actually, that can you even that wave out, make it nice and smooth, and that tends to come from your recovery, your ability to realise that you can pull back.
Especially as an older athlete, like you say, that becomes more and more important.
Well, you've got all your experience, you've got you've learned so much as an athlete by then, and then it's like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to do this for as long as you possibly could for a personal point of view? It could be monetary.
Yep.
It could be like, I want to literally milk this cow for as long as I can.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Or is it to create a legacy? It could be, I want to be a real leader in this sport, and I want to create the big legacy within this sport. That will only happen if you can stay out on the field, out on the half pipe as long as you can, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting part. I want to talk about flow, because we just touched on it, and now we can really delve into it. So obviously with the guys on the half pipe there, you mentioned there's something that you just can't teach them, because it's a feel, and it's just something that happens. And I know you're huge into flow, and I've my own sort of, I think my own version of flow has I've deeply known it for a long time, just given it a different name. I used to call it autopilot, for example. When I was playing, it was like you'd come off the field and you just couldn't explain how a good performance happened, or you have this good experience and you just can't explain it for what it is. So where's like your interest in flow come from? Was it from the athletes that you were dealing with?
It wasn't initially, no. It was I said earlier, so from China, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer, so I left my job in China to come home to England to give her end-of-life care. And following that, of losing my mum and that period afterwards, I just couldn't get back into looking at sport or I had to work very hard at my technical knowledge. I was always really good with people, coaching and getting buy-in, but I always had to keep working at my technical knowledge, and I just couldn't get into it. And so I just came across an organisation called the Flow Genome Project, and just what they were talking about it was like they were in my mind about these moments that I'd had in my life that, like you said, were just unexplainable. They were just so amazing. And so I began training with them. And
this is Jamie Wheel.
Jamie Wheel and Stephen Collar, yeah. And although they've gone separate ways now. And so for me, it was a very personal journey through that. And what I love about flow, and where the Flow Genome Project are coming from, because it's not a new term. It's been around for a long time, even all the way back into ancient traditions. They've kind of talked about it in different ways, but scientifically it's been around since Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. But what the Flow Genome Project are doing are kind of open sourcing what a flow state looks like biologically, and then you can kind of alter the knobs and levers of life to make it more likely you're going to get access to flow state.
Yeah, I think that's a really big point as well. People I've spoken to about flow is they feel like it's almost like unobtainable, but realizing that there's so many things you can do to trigger the likelihood that it will happen. You want it to happen the same way you want a good performance in sport or a good performance in a good day in life to happen. You're doing things around that to make the likelihood, the percentages of that go up, and the likelihood of that going up. So I think that's a really important point of how to access it.
And flow, for people, what stood out for me as well is, for people don't understand, dog in the background, having a good season, flow. The acronym STIR says selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. Selflessness, you lose a sense of I, you lose a sense of you, like you're just in the present moment. T is timelessness, time slows down or speeds up. E is effortlessness, you're just doing something without thought, you're just doing it in that moment. And R, which is the most interesting for me, is richness. So the information richness that we receive in a non-ordinary state, which flow state is. And so that could be creativity, inspiration, insight. It's just a higher level of consciousness.
Yeah. So do you break each one of those down, and is there something that you do, I guess personally, or whether you're coaching? Actually, let's go back. So once you start to become aware of flow, from your own personal journey, that then leaked into, wow, can I actually start to coach it? Can I start to be more aware of my athletes that are in it? I think you were in a really good sport for it as well. Like I mean, I've never tried doing anything like what the snowboarders and skiers are doing, but I have been skiing, and I have, I believe, like, I've experienced flow, and I experience it through my lifestyle, through my things that I do, the watts that I do. But did it change for how you coached, and like, how do you give the best possible way of accessing that stir, and sort of setting people up to really become aware of it?
I think, talking about the acrobatic athletes or the snowboarders, that's fundamentally, that's why they do what they do, to feel that moment. And it's not like they get it every single time. They call it the stoke. That's stoke, the feeling of stoked, or they're stoked. Oh, right, yeah, it's when they're pushing the boundaries and they do it and they land, it's that thing that the reason why they do it. Yes, they want to win X Games medals and Olympic medals, but really it's that feeling that they're getting from it, because it's untouchable. Yeah. How do you relate that to all of us or everyone else? There's criteria that you need to put, and you have to understand that struggle is important. You can't just, flow is the wonderful bit, but you have to be entering a task or activity that engages you to focus, because struggle, you can either disengage, or if it's too hard, then you'll disengage because you can't see the progress. There's a sweet spot, challenge skills ratio. And so once you hit that sweet spot of struggle, you're then focusing, you're paying attention, and then that's the doorway into flow. Doesn't mean you're going to get into flow, but you have to have an element of struggle.
So you have to be willing to access that
as
well, don't you?
Exactly that.
And that kind of goes to the Chinese, like they're willing to fail.
Like
that moment where they're standing at the top of the diving board, they're willing to fail. And
really, like, the failing is part of it, right? Get back up, try again, get back up, try again, and then all of a sudden, I mean, again, this is individual and different sports and different people, but that trying again, you'll get it. And it kind of, that process of when you're in that mindset of flow, it's what technically defined as the state of consciousness that we feel our best and perform our best. And we're processing so much information so much quicker than we can in our normal waking state. That's why that's flow. You're just flowing, you're just doing. And so, recognizing that struggle is a key part of accessing flow.
Is a part of a beginning. Do you work with the hierarchy of competence quite a bit? So the like being unconsciously incompetent. Consciously incompetent, and then
knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know, knowing what you don't know.
So that I think that's usually a really big part of it. An analogy I give is learning to drive. Like you tend to be you the first moment you ever go to set foot in a car, there's that little bit, oh my god, I'm literally being put behind a machine, and I've got to figure out what all these wheels and knobs and everything that are doing, and pedals and what's going on, and you're so conscious in what you're doing. Then you're so aware of every move that you're doing. And you were willing to get in that car. So there was that moment you're willing to get in a car. So you've already gone through that struggle. Then you've started to learn. You've started to access the actual things that you need to do within the car to learn how to do it. And then over time, you've gone in, you've put yourself in that struggle. You've gone through that sort of conscious behavior again, but you've done it over and over and over until you eventually have those moments where you're driving without even thinking about it. And then you're able to enjoy the drive.
Yes, I exactly that. And I think to relate it to everyone else, or if you're a new athlete or you're training, again, in my experience, the best athletes can embrace trying something new and they're no good at it to start, because they see it as a process of just getting better, rather than I've seen other athletes not wanting to do things and disengaging because they don't like not being good. And so if you don't like not being good, you're going to be fixed in one parameter.
So now we're talking about fixed and growth mindsets as well.
Exactly that. Like been comfortable with just engaging in something new, a new practice, a new skill development, a new role on the pitch, it could be a million different things, but embracing that to think, okay, this is going to get me to a higher level of performance, whatever that performance is, at work, in sport, if in a relationship. Like, it's easy to, communication is the hardest thing. it's the best thing, but it's the hardest thing. And to nurture a quality relationship, you have to have those difficult conversations sometimes, or to think, hang on, where can I improve? Whether your loved one, whether your parent, whether your child, whether your friend, a co-worker, they're the enriching and conversations that are going to help people grow.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do, but kind of...
that was kind of similar to what we were talking before we started recording, actually, about having those... because sometimes it's not necessarily, in order to grow, you may physically or skill-wise be pretty much at the top of your game, but that little bit of growth that you have could be internal, could be really like an internal growth. And we'd spoken about relationships, about being a big part of it, and I guess this now goes on to more you as a person rather than the actual technical side of being a coach, and your journey of understanding flow. But that ability to be better as a person and access sort of your understanding of your identity as a person first can actually improve everything else as well. The brief conversation we'd have was around sort of my retirement, and I felt I had an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was, and actually I became much better. I believe if my injuries weren't going to recur, I would be a much better professional now than I was when I retired, because I've had 2 years of really understanding myself as a person, because those little bits were like the missing lock, the missing key to unlocking even more. They were there for... because it could have been a conversation, not realising that a conversation with someone was, I was shutting it off because of I was protecting my ego, my identity, and I think those are it's a really big part of not only just an athlete, a high performer, but just as people in general, to have those conversations that struggle to open up new parts of you that you didn't think exist.
For sure.
Yeah. It's
with your adversity of your injuries and your condition and then your injuries, you're stepping into, again, me looking in, you're stepping into a new phase now from moving away from sport, or 2 years moving away from sport, but the education and the message that you're passing on is so much more powerful because of that adversity you've been through.
Yeah. So where do you feel kind of you're at with it at the moment, I guess? Both in your own personal life, but also as a coach as well, because I know you've stepped away from coaching as well.
Yep.
You have stepped away from
sport
from
now,
doing as much and you're working a lot more with Anna, your partner.
Anna, with kind of anyone really. What do I do now? Anyone, like the lessons that I've learned to give them, to provide them to anyone who wants to grow and to be their best version. And so with regards to that coaching, where am I with that? I think that performance is to be our best, and to be our best is to bring awareness to ourselves and to shine a light into the areas that all areas of our life, and to uncover the darker sides, the shadow sides, and that takes time, and that's a difficult process, but it only provides growth and allows us, an individual, to be a better partner, parent, friend, co-worker, colleague, leader, and leader being, So that's where I'm at with coaching.
And you're running a program called Olympic Essentials.
Olympic Essentials, Olympic Essentials.
Which I love the premise of it, because this kind of goes back to some of the stuff we're talking about, where you're taking some of the Olympic backgrounds, the theories and the ideologies and the mindsets around it, and helping people implement that into their daily lives. Which is a great message, because again, it's something that resonates with me. I believe you can take something from sport and add it into your daily life.
So much. And kind of what we said earlier, like what sportsmen do or athletes do is amazing, but it's their mindset, it's their practice, it's their approach that we can learn from. It's the traits that they're underpinning that success that all of us have access to, and all of us have, and we can that's what I've seen, and that's what I want to pass on. It's so rewarding for me to be able to do that now, and to see how that changes people's lives. It's profound. And
and it's not everything, is it? It's
No.
not. It's not like you've got to be getting up at 5:30 in the
No
morning
way,
and
no.
being that sort of person and going to the gym but it's
nothing like that. No.
It's so totally, the mindset is accessible. Like everyone can have the mindset of a high performing athlete, a high performer.
Yeah.
But the parts that are non-negotiable are the skills that those high performers have. Like you can't wish to that 10 years of acrobatic diving training. Like that's a skill you have to go and learn. So the skill is the same.
Their practice, the skill that the practice, whatever that practice is. Like you said, you could be a musician, you could be a creative, you could be an artist, you could be a musician, whatever. But it's the practice of that skill. But that skill, the practice of that and of those skills is underpinned by certain traits that make you excel or not excel. And
so is there part of your Olympic Essentials program? Is there talk us through it?
Yeah.
Like, talk us through sort of the elements that you
so it runs over 12 weeks and it's delivered online, and then we have a weekly group coaching, live group coaching, that we break down some of the concepts that we introduce each week. We start off with mindset, because I think mindset is fundamental. And really the mindset is coming at a point of, we've mentioned it, like fixed or growth. Like we're all a mixture of fixed or growth, but trying to highlight what areas you're fixed and where can you nurture that growth mindset, and how to nurture a growth mindset. It's uncomfortable at times. And then, operating from a place of drama triangle, for example, where a victim, persecutor and rescuer, an example would be you could have been a victim of your condition. You could have been, but you didn't. You used it as, it's seemingly, me looking in it, you used that as to shift you into more of a place of empowerment. Mm-hmm. So how do you do that? How do you shift from drama into empowerment? And then we go into breath. Breath is so popular now, which is such a great thing, but it's so simple, but it's so effective in managing internal state, anxiety, kind of worries, bringing you to the present moment to be more clear, to give you better cognitive performance. It's so simple. And then we go into kind of rejuvenating movement, or regenerating movement, kind of a movement that's nurturing without equipment, yoga flows. Then go to nutrition and sleep. Again, nurturing key things about that. And then the last part of the course is all about flow state, what flow is, the science, and kind of how do you input that in your life. And so that's the kind of the idea.
And the people that are accessing that are just a broad spectrum of people.
Yeah,
this is not athletes. These are
not at all. Musicians, writers, doctor, architect, financial people working in financial services. It's a whole broad spectrum of people that are kind of really looking to take ownership of their life and to interact with life better, so they can be that better parent, partner, friend, and leadership, the internal leadership of themselves as well as other people.
Yeah, mate, it's amazing. I think what you're doing is, because of your background, not only from a professional point of view, but like your personal journey. I think I'd have liked to have been coached by you when I was growing up, that's for sure. But I think the stuff that people can learn from your professional and personal journey, it was so worthwhile listening to, and just taking the time to engage with this sort of thing. Again, it does go back to that willingness to be open and the willingness to go into that struggle to start with, to open up at the possibilities of how you can better yourself, whether that's professionally or just in your life. It's such a big step for people to make, but it is the hardest, isn't it?
Definitely
the hardest.
But so worthwhile.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you so much for.
Thank you very much.
Giving me your time. I think maybe we should try and get in the sea now.
Yeah, for sure.
It's looking pretty good. But yeah, no, mate. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you.
And I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Cheers,
Thank you, mate.